Yes.
Alrighty. Stand and say the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning again. First of all, we'll have the agenda approval. Any additions or subtractions?
Mr. Chair, there were two that Denise mentioned in an email to you that we were pulling the attorney client privileged conversation for a future meeting. And then we added the item relative to the sheriff and the approval of the grant resolution. So Sheriff Aukus will be here this morning.
Okay. And I know there was some talk of pulling the sheriff's item?
Yes, I would like to pull the sheriff's item. I'd like a conversation with him at the work session.
Okay.
Which item were you thinking about pulling?
The resolution for the office.
The DUI one?
Yep.
Is there a deadline or anything on that you have to be worried about?
I have no idea.
I don't believe that there is.
Okay.
But I would, since he will be here this morning, perhaps we leave it on the agenda and then have the
Table it.
discussion and then table it
Okay.
while he's here. I think
Okay.
have this discussion with him would be better.
Alrighty. And with that, can I get a motion to approve?
Make that motion.
Thank you, Dan. To move things along, I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Public input. Don't all run up at once. There appears to be no public input today, so we will move on to the consent agenda. There again, was there any changes or additions?
No.
Alrighty, if I can get a motion.
I'll move.
Move.
Oh, I'll second.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. County employee recognition. Today we have for the Sheriff's Department, Zachary Brosdahl, dispatch jailer, began the full-time position on September 28th, 2022. Social Services, Danelle Dalton, eligibility worker, is recognized for 10 years of service effective October 1st, 2022. In Solid Waste, we have Christina Hall, Green Corps worker, began her position on September 19th, 2022. Thank you all. And now we'll move on to Highway.
Good morning. All right, first on our agenda today, we've got approved final payment for project CP 29-22-02. This is our egg surfacing, and everything is in order, so I would recommend final payment to William D. Sapaniak for $27,066.92.
I liked how you broke out and showed us the financial impact, Chad. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so you should have the townships and the
Yeah.
county stuff and then the stockpile all in there. Yeah, so that's, yeah, I think that helps to understand kind of how involved the project was, but yeah.
Also move.
Second.
Thank you, Shar. Thank you, David. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And second is approved final payment for project CP 29-22-03, our liquid calcium chloride and our DuraBlend mix. I would recommend the final payment to Envirotech Services, $53,012.66. And you should have had that broken down as well. And you can see that program is getting quite large, and we're getting excellent participation from the townships too. I think they're seeing the advantages of the calcium chloride, even though there's also disadvantages that go along with it. But all in all, it's a good product, and it really helps us keep the maintenance costs down and save on some of our resources too, as far as regraveling and whatnot. So
Chad, go ahead, Dan.
Didn't we have a couple of test strips with the different
Just what I was
products?
gonna ask.
well, yeah, we had some test strips from last year. the Envirotech had some different products that they wanted us to take a look at, that were some that were similar to some base stabilizers that we had used in the past, or a base stabilizer. And so we were up and we took a look at those with Envirotech this year. And it was interesting. Some of their products are very expensive in, you know, even to a degree that you would kind of question bringing some other type of application in, whether it be you could do a double chip seal or possibly even, you know, grade and pave a road at some point. They were talking, you know, $20,000 plus per mile for some of their things. So we were looking at those prices thinking, oh, this must be really, really good. Well, we didn't see a huge advantage on some of it. Some of it looked really nice. The stuff that they had laid out, it was almost like a syrup, like a molasses type deal. Made the road very dark. And it works, but, you know, to quantify the cost, it's just significantly more than calcium chloride. And so long-term, we don't know. We just saw it through one freeze thaw. We didn't see enough to where we would say, yep, we're gonna jump on board for 20,000 plus per mile. But it was interesting to see. And some of it just flat out failed, where they had to come back through and they had to apply the DuraBlend or chloride back on it. It was very, very sticky, never had a chance to really seep into the material, and it just kind of picked up on all the tires, and yeah, it was just essentially a waste. But, you know, they were fine with it. They gave it to us at a very low cost, and actually where it failed, they covered the cost then to put the chloride back on. So it was no disadvantage to the county at all on these test strips, and just kind of fun to see that, you know, we're trying different things. We want, you know, less chlorides if it's gonna be as effective, and just some different options. So pleased with how that went. Saw some good and some not so good.
You gonna change it up next year?
Not at this point. You know, they might have different products that they want to test at some point, but what we're seeing right now is that the DuraBlend is probably gonna be our go-to. I think this next year we'll continue to increase our percentage of using that DuraBlend. That's the product that leaches a little bit less, and but it is a 20% higher cost. We think we're getting that. It stays on the road for a significantly longer period of time. So we like that, and there was quite a few townships that actually switched over to DuraBlend this year as well.
About County Road 23, have you heard anything from the community there?
Well, we get calls every once in a while. I think that they're not all on the same page over there. There's some residents that are calling saying, you know, we didn't sign the petition. We don't have a problem with the chloride. We would rather have the chloride than we would have the dust. And these tend to be the ones that live more by the lake. And, you know, they're concerned that all this dust coming off the road, it coats everything, and that's a pollutant in and of itself. And they didn't get, you know, if they weren't on the side of the group wanting no chloride, then they didn't get asked in on the petition. That's the way they feel. I shouldn't speak for them, but that's how they've put it anyway. So anyway, they're not all on the same page out there. At some point, you may get faced with the decision, you know, do we do it, do we not? As we had discussed, the County Road 23 construction is on the plans for 2027 for grading and paving. You know, and that's still a long ways out. We have to get from here to there, still properly maintaining that road too. So it's dry, it's dusty, it's rough. That's what you get without chloride, and we're at the mercy of the rain then at that point to properly maintain that road. So we get both sides. We get a lot of calls on it.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Is there any further discussion? Can I get a motion? Thank you, Tom. I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And then with that, I don't know if you caught the conversation I was having with Administrator Cadwell. With final payments, we've always brought those to the board. If you want to see them, that's great. We'll continue to bring them. If you want them to go on the consent agenda, I guess today was maybe not a good example because there was questions, and we like the questions and whatnot. So it's up to you guys. If you want it on the consent agenda, we'll put it on there. Otherwise, we'll continue bringing final payments. The only reason we would put it on the consent agenda is these projects are approved already through you, and so it doesn't take a lot of time. So we're fine bringing it back, but just let me know if you'd rather see that on the consent agenda.
I guess I myself kind of like the the back and forth we have.
Good.
I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel.
That gives us an update on how the project's went.
Yeah, and if there is a larger overrun, you know, we don't bring every contract change back to you because we have to keep the projects going too. And so if there is a significant change over the course of the project, you would be able to see it then with the final payment that it doesn't match what the original approval was too. So, yep, I'm fine with that. So, okay. We'll do a project update, I think.
Okay, all right. Yeah, the only couple projects, both with Knife River Materials, our County Stated Highway 16 job is completed now, all the final details, the pavement marking. We had a couple areas that they had to grind for surfacing because they were out of our tolerance. So that was completed, and they sealed those surfaces and touch up the pavement marking out there, so that job is done. The other project with Knife River Materials, our County Road 119, which is also tied into our County Road 82, and a couple of township jobs. They have pushed us back now another week. They are looking at starting the grading next Monday. And it's due to the circumstances they're in with another project with the state, behind schedule, weather conditions, and whatnot. So I'm confident if things go normally, they'll be able to get the grading done this year. And the gravel surfacing down, and we'll move into paving next year. So that's my feeling. It could change, the weather might cooperate a little better than normal and everything gets done. I'm thinking that's probably what Knife River Materials would like to see, but we'll see what Mother Nature hands us, so.
I drove County Road 16 last Friday to go to Walker for the Mississippi Headwaters Board meeting, and it was pretty nice till you hit Cass County.
Yeah.
You can tell where the line is.
Little bit of an improvement on 16, yeah. Yeah, that was a good project.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah. And since you have a short agenda too, I'll mention, we have a student from Park Rapids that's gonna job shadow with us today. And so if you're hearing anybody in the community talk about job shadowing and they wanna come in, we absolutely love to have these students come in and show them how exciting our work is. But, no, actually, we do honestly love it and try and get them at an age where you can kind of spark an interest in them and pick up on this stuff. So yeah, we've got one student from Park Rapids. The Neva School has been fantastic in the past. So yeah, if you hear any rumblings, send them our way. We'll let them spend a half day or even a full day with our crew and see different things. Now that we have the drone, it actually is a little bit more exciting, and that's what the youth seem to be interested in. So it's fun.
And they weren't interested in coming to the meeting with you this morning?
They're not coming in till 10, otherwise we would have. Yeah. So, yep. But okay, that's all we got.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the wife
Solid
and I went to
waste.
a Tasca this weekend, and we're driving 40 and then up and around or whatever. And she had commented how nice the road is, and I said, we got good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I thought it was pretty good comment.
Agenda item I have for you this morning is to review and approve quote for HVAC work at the South Transfer Station. This is, work is being done as a result of the fire again that we had in June. It's kind of the last outstanding project that we have to complete. And it was to replace our heat pump, air exchanger, thermostats, and then to clean and inspect some exhaust fans we had on the commercial side of the transfer station. The work had been reviewed and authorized by MCIT, and again, a majority of the funds have already been received for the work that we've been completing. And once the final work is complete, then final retainage, we can apply to get that released from MCIT to cover all the costs. So the local 2 quotes were received for this project. Samuelson Laney Plumbing, Heating and Cooling in Park Rapids was a low quote at $7,912. And that'd be my recommendation.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Sure.
Thank you, Dan.
I'll second.
Thank you, David. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, well, that's all I had. If you saw their Green Corps member was on the new employee recognition chart. She had a training today, else I would have brought her up here, but maybe at a future meeting I'll bring her along so you guys can meet her. But I think she's been here a couple weeks already, and we'll be getting rolling on a lot of education and outreach projects for the department, and I'm looking forward to that, so.
Thank you. Sheriff's Department. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, the only thing I have on my agenda is requesting approval of the resolution for the acceptance of the DWI enforcement grant. It was approved, the position was approved at the August 16th board, regular board meeting. And you should have a copy of the resolution attached.
So Corey, thank you for answering my email.
Yes.
I appreciate the explanation. And I'm thinking that possibly the questions I have would beg a longer discussion at a work session. So just regarding the resolution here, I have a question. So it says in the term, the creation and validity of this grant agreement, blah, 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 let's see. The grantee may claim reimbursement for expenditures incurred pursuant to the payment clause of this grant contract agreement. So, if I understand it correctly, a deputy, one deputy his salary would be paid through this grant.
Yes.
So then, is the grant contract agreement tied to the amount of DUIs given? What do they mean by that? Reimbursement for expenditures incurred pursuant to the payment clause. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, the requirement of the grant is to have, I believe the only stipulation they put is to try to have one contact per hour average when you're working the grant. That's
So
certainly,
does that mean, contact means you actually stop somebody?
yes.
Okay.
Now,
thank you.
again, this isn't just, DUIs. I
Yep.
mean, this is,
Yep.
speeders, this is distracted driving. This is all forms of, activity that lead to unsafe, driving, practices is
Yep.
what this enforcement thing is for. So that's all that is. And let's just say you don't quite get that average, they don't take the grant away. It's just something that they want you to shoot for is one contact per hour.
Okay, and
And that
then,
can be a warning, it's
Okay.
not, that's, yeah.
okay. And then, policy implications when we approve this prior position is contingent upon future continued grant funding. So let's say we approve this and the grant was funded for 2 years and then it was taken away. So,
Then that position goes away,
okay.
yes.
Did this grant, Corey, go out to every single county within the state?
Every county, every city in the state has an opportunity to apply for it, yes. Absolutely.
So there is no requirement on the amount of tags.
No, as far as how many you have to arrest or write, no, it's contact only,
And that's per shift,
yes.
one contact per hour
Yes.
per shift.
And I want you to know, my staff issue far more warnings than they do actual written citations or arrests, they simply do. I just want you to know there's absolutely a zero tolerance, for the impaired driving, that we do. If somebody's drunk or high on drugs and you're driving, they're gonna go to jail. I mean, that's just the way it is. It just has to be that way. I mean, that's what kills people, on the highways, and that's what we're there for the public safety aspect of that.
How do you document?
Recap for me. How many DWI arrests were there last year?
I wanna say roughly we're 100 above last year. In fact, I think we are, we're gonna be I think we're at about 300 this year, so I believe we were roughly 200 last year,
So that's over 50% increase.
yes.
So the question, I think the discussion that has to happen at the work session is that sustainable
As far as
funding?
the funding? You mean from
It's more than just your department. It also goes deeper countywide than that. And as we've seen the repercussions of the expense that entails when the jail's full, we have to have a greater discussion about where our policy's gonna lie on that, because we can't have an increase of 50% every year and think that that's sustainable.
Well, you can't, it will not increase every year. You can't do it.
Yep, there's no room.
No, but you physically
Yes.
couldn't. Even if you did have room, there's just not enough time in the day, not enough officers to even create that much activity. You simply can't. The reason there was such a huge increase is because of some new staff that we hired. Some new, young officers are getting in the, working traffic enforcement a little bit differently. Maybe some of them, I believe, went from day shifts to night shifts. That's what's happened. This isn't something that truly is gonna increase 100 every year. Right now, we're truly, what I see as kind of, peaked. Again, it's because of, different staff and stuff. But these numbers are not gonna go away. I mean, these numbers are these numbers without the grant position. And yes, it creates more work for the county attorney, but so did the pipeline. So does, anything, any extra activity is gonna create additional work for the county attorney.
But the constraints on the budget, Corey, is, and I think you appreciate this, that, $1 million increase in public safety budget this year, now that's gonna lead to what kind of increase in the attorney's office for next year? And at some point, you can't have these increases like this over and over and over again. It's not sustainable. So there has to be a greater policy discussion on what is sustainable and what are we willing, where is our level of sustainability in all this from a budgetary standpoint? And then that has to translate into an enforcement policy.
Well, the enforcement policy lies under, what law enforcement does every day when we're working. There is gonna be no bending when it comes to keeping the road safe. If an officer stops a car and they're high on drugs and they're driving, if you're expecting us to not take them to jail, not hold them accountable, I'm just gonna tell you, that's not gonna happen. It simply isn't. We can't do that, and we're not gonna do that. If that makes the county attorney's office, and I don't think the county attorney is asking for us, to do that either. He never has.
Right.
There's, I think I don't know if we're on the same plane when we're talking about what we do or what we have to do. We're not gonna look the other way on these. And so far, what has the increase been? It's been the impaired drivers, which is the most dangerous part of the vehicles on the road. I would certainly hope and assume that the board supports keeping those people off the road, because that's what we're doing, and that's what has led to, an increase in arrests and an increase in the jail population. Our average daily population for the year is 70. There's still room, there's still room in our jail, for these people. It goes up and down. On Mondays, there's typically more because of, arrests that, took place on the weekends. It's not going away. It just simply isn't.
It's a different position up here, though. My job is to balance not only public safety, but the budget. And where is the proper equation point in all of that, where enforcement is sound and protects the public safety, but I also protect taxpayers through the budget. You just can't just throw money forever.
Yeah, but
It just can't go that way.
But this
Corey.
position that I'm here for today, you approved it already. Now, I'm assuming you would like the state to fund it.
That's not the problem. It goes back to in the grant, when we discussed this a minute, that I agreed to it reluctantly because of all of the consequences we're now facing. We're now facing a full jail, and now it's like kicking over dominoes, and now it's gonna affect the legal department, and everywhere else, and the budget just goes room. So where is that happy medium? That's where, you know, we need to sit down, maybe in committee or something, and have an actual discussion on where our policy's gonna land on all this, and how you're gonna meld the budget with how you enforce. Because there's not an unlimited supply of money. And I believe in strong enforcement. I support, you know, what you're trying to do, but there's another side of the equation that has to be looked at. And you have to find a happy medium there that works for both.
Well, there's no way I'm gonna ask my staff to loosen up on DUI arrests. I can't. This is one way to fund what we're already doing. You know, if we don't take the money, other counties are gonna get it.
Well, that's not always a good reason to do something, though.
Well, that's not the only reason.
Yeah.
That's not why I'm here, to keep
Right.
Beltrami from getting it or Hennepin to get it. But this is something that we're already doing. This isn't a new thing. This is one opportunity to fund
Right.
additional revenue. I don't always get an opportunity for this additional revenue. This is an opportunity for that outside revenue to fund this position, something that we are already doing.
But are
it's-
you hearing the other side of the equation I'm talking about? It's not just about your department. It's about the consequences throughout the rest of the county and the rest of the budget. That's my point, you know. You're right, I'm right. But where's the happy medium? That's what we gotta try and find.
So are you talking about the county attorney's office?
I'm talking about the county's attorney's office. I'm talking about the expense of, you know, filling the jail with our residents and losing the revenue from being able to take in inmates from other counties. It's a bunch of things.
I think he's talking about that, Corey, excuse me, David, but then also probation, social services,
Mhm.
everybody's involved and the expenses keep going up, I think. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the other side of the equation. It's like, it may work, you know, it might fit nice and tidy in your department, in your budget, but it also has consequences across other departments that have funding constraints too. I know, for an example, probationary services, I mean, they haven't had a decent funding increase from the state of Minnesota since, I think it was 1996. I mean, it's ridiculous. So they work with pretty good constraints that makes it hard for them to do more. So we have to have a broader discussion on how these things are gonna work together.
The county attorney has asked that we put this conversation on a general government committee meeting, to have that conversation and to work some of those things out. The next available one would be October 18th.
Which would be good by me.
Is there a deadline on this grant to have it signed?
The position started yesterday. It started on the 1st,
Okay,
so it's already started.
okay. And then,
We approved the grant, so unless we're going to undo what we did,
yeah.
you know, approving the resolution is just fait accompli.
And then the question I have is, if we have to start shipping inmates to other counties, do you have money in the budget for that?
We did not budget additional for doing that. We don't foresee that for next year, so that, which is why I didn't budget for that, no.
Thank you.
Well, I agree that we need to discuss that some more, but the position's already filled. So I think this resolution needs to go forward, but at the same time, get it on the government and then discuss more about it.
I have no problem discussing this, in general, but again, for this grant purpose, you did approve it 2 weeks ago. We did, it's been filled, the person has started. This simply gets the funding going from the state, and it tells the state, yep, we're on board and start reimbursing us. That's what this is,
And I'm not suggesting that we don't do the grant. I'm just suggesting it's gotta lead to a broader discussion.
Right, I'm in agreement to that, yeah.
And after Corey responded in my email, I am fine with that too. But part of and you don't have to answer this today, because it's gonna go to the government. You guys can talk this through. But one of my questions is if it's increased 100, and we're not done with the year yet, how come you don't see it increasing to the point in the years after that we might have to house our inmates somewhere else? And so that's a question that I would ask you guys to discuss within the committee. I'm just trying to understand.
Yep, well, I'll answer that the best that I can. When you have, how can I word this, young officers that maybe were, well, some of them were on day shifts, for example. You don't get too many DUIs when you're on day shifts, for example. Well, when they switch to night shifts, all of a sudden, they can enforce DUIs. So boom, there was an increase from that individual person, you know? So we'll take one deputy who maybe went from 5 DUIs in a year because he or she was working day shifts, to all of a sudden, maybe that person had 30 because they're working nights. Okay, well, there's your increase. That's why you had a big increase. Well, now that person is on nights. Those numbers are not gonna still go up and up and up because he's already working night shifts. And that has happened, you know, with others. New hires that we've had have gone to drug interdiction school, which they didn't have the previous year or two. So boom, that's the, you know, increase in those numbers. You know, there's no way these officers can get 200 DUIs a year. They're responsible for other calls. You just can't do it. That's why I look at where each individual is at now. I feasibly do not see that going up. You simply can't. I'm not saying it won't go up a few percent, but this was a huge increase, and I truly believe that is pretty much where things are gonna stay. Just because of, you know, officers can only do so much.
Okay,
You
thank
know.
you.
So another thing, when we have the discussion at the agenda, is to think about, are there things we could be doing to be preventative?
For people driving,
More things that we could spend more time on the preventative side of it, so we don't have the expense of filling our jail, but we're still we're keeping them off the road, impaired drivers off the road.
possibly, I mean, that's not really my wheelhouse, but I mean, there's certainly possibly something
But that
there.
could fit within the specifications of this grant, could it not?
You mean like billboards and signage
No.
and things
Well,
of that
billboards
nature?
or just, you know, having
Education.
some presence at some places where people are coming from that typically might have been problem areas, and just talking to people
Well, I think we
prior to
we
themselves
already had
putting themselves in that position.
With HIP and,
You know, we already had that up in my district, I think.
Yeah, like a saturation or,
Yeah, I think so. And then did it move from there to
So-
Akeley or Nevis, Akeley, and I don't know where this.
well, Hubbard in Prevention does do a lot of that already. You know, they have billboards, they put stuff in your liquor establishments, you know, hangars and stuff that talk about that. Again, I'm certainly not an expert on that part of it, because that's not really in what we do, you know, in what law enforcement does. But again, I'm certainly willing to have, you know, a conversation at a later date with the county attorney and with a couple of board members on this. I'm not opposed to that, you know, whatsoever, but I just think it's a separate thing from what I'm asking for today.
Corey, do we see a lot of repeat offenders?
Yes.
So that's-
Not necessarily repeat in Hubbard County, because we have a lot of people that are not from Hubbard County that are getting DUIs.
Okay.
They're from long ways away. But yeah, they've had previous DUIs before, yes.
Okay, and I think that's a lot of the problem with it. You know,
Oh, completely.
you would think the average person getting caught once would learn.
Yep, and what happens, we're picking people up that are already on probation, so they're being held longer because of that. And then they're repeat offenders, so they get held longer because of that. So, yes.
That's gonna be my question of mine, is when someone's picked up, how long are they held?
Depends.
Totally depends. I'm gonna give you an example. Some people, if they've been drinking, if it's alcohol, if it's their first DUI, they'll be released the next day when they're sober. If they're a repeat offender, if it's a gross misdemeanor or a felony level, they have to be held for court. So then the judge will either release them on their own, or the judge will put set a bail amount on them. If they're on probation, the probation officer very well may want them held, and then the judge would want them held as well. So it really depends. There's no cut and dried answer on that. It just depends on who gets brought in. Yeah.
What's the timeline on blood? From the,
That's a very good question, and that's part of our problem,
Yeah,
is when we send a blood test to the lab, to the BCA lab in St. Paul, it's nothing to have to wait 6 months to get those test results back.
6 months?
Yes.
so then
So do they stay in jail for 6 months while you're waiting?
It all depends on the individual. If the judge put a high bail on them and they're not able to bail out, then yes. Yeah,
so like, I know you wouldn't, or I wouldn't know this answer, but when you look at, breath and blood, where are we at as far as how many samples, to each?
well, 82% of our arrests are from drugs, are drug DUIs.
So they're-
82%,
So that's on blood.
yes.
So
That's a
then
huge number.
82% are them that may be up to 6 months, depending on when you get the
Right.
results.
Yep, that is it's a huge number. 82% drugs are, it's unheard of. But that's what we're dealing with.
Okay,
Plus,
then.
then if they're on medication, then that's an additional responsibility of your jail staff that they have to give.
Oh, completely,
Yeah.
yes.
Better continue our meeting, otherwise you're
Yeah.
gonna, time management wise, Ted, you're gonna.
So I'm gonna move that we approve the resolution, and then, this isn't tied, it's just a comment. You guys will have further discussion with Corey later. Thank you, this has been very informational.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Shar. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
Yep.
Administrator.
Mr. Chair, I believe we're going to start with an update on the budget and some operations at Heritage Center. And Kurt must have just stepped out, but he'll be right back.
And David, did you wanna?
Yeah, I can start quickly with just kind of summarizing how we arrived at this point and where we're at, and then Katie and Kurt will go over the budget that she's handing out, and any questions you guys might have for them or more details, they'll be able to answer those. But so how did we arrive at this point? By resolution 11-21-1209, Hubbard County agreed to $1.5 million in equity to a project of remodeling Heritage Campus in 2014. Hubbard County then agreed to an additional $2 million in equity at year 7 to help with refinancing the remaining debt, which did not occur because of interest rates, but that occurred fall of 2021, but the refinance part did not occur because it didn't make much sense to do so. The remodel was a 3-year project with portions of the campus shut down for periods of time. The first full year in operation after the remodel was 2019. The remodel exhausted much of the cash on hand. When COVID hit and we lost 13 residents in the nursing home, the census did not rebound. It continued to decline to below 50% due to the pandemic. At the same time, the senior living market more than doubled in size in our area. And in addition, the pandemic and its related policy issues accelerated staffing shortages across the healthcare sector. This put added pressure on the Manor and HLC. Hospitals experienced difficulty during the pandemic also, so temporary stay patient intake completely disappeared. Through the pandemic, the campus was losing money at a clip of about $180K plus a month. Austerity measures were instituted, but without a robust census, not much more can be cut. The county continues to explore options for divestiture, but with the cost of money increasing rapidly due to the rising rising interest rates, a potential sale may be difficult or slow to materialize. Our current state, approximately $2 million of the county's American Rescue Plan Act money has been used to date to keep the Heritage Campus in operation. It appears like approximately $1.2 million more will be needed to shore up the operations for the remainder of 2022. Moving forward, the 2023 budget projects a small positive cash flow, but at some point, a much greater cash flow is needed to account for depreciation and interest expense. The county board should consider to continue the ECPN support as it has in the past. The county board will look at the 2023 budget options and Workback Plan today. Heritage Campus needs to be more nimble and aggressive in its marketing. The market has changed and the competition is great, so the 2023 budget reflects a more robust marketing strategy. Heritage Manor currently is positioned to start accepting new residents and will be the first priority in the marketing plan. Temporary stay patients have not fully come back yet due to staffing and hospital staff shortages. Staffing issues remain a major concern for Heritage Living Center, and you'll see that in the budget by looking at the nursing expense line in the financials. HLC continues to use the traveling nurse pool to cover nursing shortages, and this is approximately 2 to 3 times more expensive than if we had our own staff. So that's one of our bigger challenges. And just for informational purposes, Heritage Living Center has 64 beds, Manor Assisted Living has 26 units, and the cottages have 18 units. Right now, census is at or below 50%, in HLC and Manors, that's still accurate. Cottage is about 85 to 100% full, but the nursing expense and inflationary items have cut into its profits. So that's where we're at. And most of you have heard too that Kurt is going to be retiring. Next month, I believe, is your last board meeting, right?
November 5th.
November 5th?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Just thinking about that as I walked up, I thought this could be my last time addressing the county board.
Well, then you can come as the public and just sit and listen.
Yeah.
People for public comment.
All right.
so I think now, we'll have Kurt and Katie kind of go through their presentation, the budget, and then if there's any other questions, we can have at it.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much. The paper that's going around is we're going to touch on the operations budgets that's in your packet, just very quickly, and then we'll get into cash flow and some other things. But as David mentioned, it's been difficult. Last year was really kind of our first full year post-COVID, and so it was really hard to know how things were going to react. And of course, the markets went a little crazy with staff and inflation and things. But this year we've got a more, I think, a better, very conservative budget plan in place. We've got better knowns than we did before, and so that's the approach that we took with this year's budget for both the manor and cottages, assisted living, and then Heritage Living Center. So just in that handout, and these are really high level, so if you've got deeper questions, feel free to ask as we go along. Mention that we budgeted on census based on real time. Last year, we kind of looked at incremental increases along the way. We gradually increased more residents, more tenants through the months, and this year we decided to, other than the manor, take a more conservative approach. And we think the budgets that are, the occupancies budgeted are attainable. Inflation has been kind of a wild card. Now, supplies and things aren't a huge part of our budget, but definitely impacting us, especially raw food, utilities, things like that. So we used a rate of 5%. There's a couple of account lines we saw 10% inflation growth, and there were a few that we just didn't see a lot of impact in. These budgets include dollars for pay and benefit increases to increase our competitiveness for standing team members. We want to retain the ones we have, and also we need to recruit new ones. And also, as David mentioned, what's critical is our movement towards sunsetting the utilization of agency staff. And within the budget, we did so by January 1st. Now, that might be a little aggressive. This is a tough labor market we're working in. But we did dramatically increase marketing dollars for the purpose of recruitment. So we're hoping that that will create an offset within that piece.
So are we now comparable with the other facilities within our community?
Yeah, well, right now we are, but that's a moving target. That's something else that's been happening that's fairly volatile, and that's pay levels for these healthcare professionals. And, you know, I don't say we can compete yet with the hospital. That's a different environment. We've seen the kinds of wages going through there. But within our area, long-term care environment, yes, we are competitive, but we still need to do more. And with labor negotiations coming up, we're going to have to see some increases, for sure. I could go through a history of CNA wages and bore you, but it's just amazing to me to see how that in the last 3 years has just grown exponentially, which is a good thing. They're very deserving caregivers, very hardworking, but it just escalated fairly quickly along with all other salaries. So Heritage Manor, if you have that handout in your packet, I think that went around already. We did include a rate increase. This budget of the three is the only one that utilizes a bit of a ramp up. And so it starts with today's occupancy, which is about 50% of the 26 units full. And it takes into consideration a slow ramp up, capping out at 23 of the 26 occupied by the end of the year. That would be September of 2023. Yet with that, we're able to attain in the middle of that sheet, there's a line called Ebitda. That's in earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so we do see a gain of almost $220,000 there. And once depreciation and amortization is pulled out, we see a net income of about $110,000. The Manor is probably our most unique model of all in that we just basically staff with one person per shift per day. That's the variables. The rest are really fixed costs. It's just building, upkeep, repair. Now, food is certainly volatile. It's based on occupancy, so we do have expenses. But beyond that, you know, there's not a lot we can shift, and that's why occupancy is so necessary to make this happen. We do have to see that growth in order for it to be successful. So that's the Manor. The cottages, that one has, not surprisingly, actually been maintaining a very high occupancy rate. We were near half occupied for a period of time, and then within a short, once we were able to start admitting, we ramped up. There's a pent-up demand yet, I believe, for people afflicted with Alzheimer's and memory care issues. And so we're maybe blessed to be able to look at more of a flat rate for occupancy. We do have a planned rate increase plan for the program that will go into effect this year. Our budget for occupancy is just 92.8% or 16.7 units throughout our year. Our full capacity, again, as David mentions, 18. Right now, we're at 17 with a planned admission in the next 2 weeks. So that would put us back at 100% occupancy. I think in the last 6 months, we had three or four months, we were 100% occupied. So again, trying to be conservative, this definitely has some potential if we can fill one more unit even and be at 17 to 18, say that could increase revenues per month, $5,000 to $8,000. So do that times 12, if that's the way it plays, the bottom line here could look a lot better. Ebitda still shows $120,000 gain, and our net income, of course, with depreciation and amortization, interest taken out, drops that to just under $20,000. The nursing home is kind of our bigger, it is our largest operation. It's exponentially larger than our assisted living. The potential is great. And I'm looking at the revenues that are nearing, if you look at that third sheet, the Heritage Living Center, one-page consolidated budget, it shows just under $6 million. You know, it wasn't that many years ago, we were well in excess of $6 million. And that shows how occupancy has really taken the starch out of the revenue fabric here and dropped away significantly. In fact, before COVID, we were running about 56 beds, and today we're at 31 with planned admissions this week. And so we're optimistic that we can not only attain this, but we'd like to go beyond 36 beds, which is even again a little higher than where we budgeted.
So Kurt, just
yeah.
a quick, so at your current staffing levels, what are the number of beds you can have at the center?
We can go up to 40 beds.
Okay, thank
With
you.
current staffing levels. So now the sky's open. We just got to get this going. They've relieved us of some of these COVID restrictions, CMS, and CDC. Have relieved some things for admission status. That does create a partial green light. We're still masking, however, because Hubbard County's a high transmission rate. That's the last really thing to go for us, other than if there's a positive case. But I do think that that's going to open it up. That's been a barrier. We've had some hospital patients, as many as half, that are in COVID protocols and things that just prevent them from coming. And by the time they get through all that and they stay in the hospital, they're ready to go home, which is a good thing. But we miss out on that short stay and that rehab potential. So that's kind of how that goes. The nursing homes rates incorporates increases for medical assistants, which is roughly 60% of our population reimbursement. Medicare and third party, which is roughly 20, is where we like it, and private pay is smaller, 10% or so. So these are CMS sets our Medicare rate, and the Minnesota Department of Human Services does our private pay and medical assistance. And again, both types pay the same rates. We don't charge private pay more than Medicaid. The occupancy used, again, is a flat rate at 64.81%, or 35 occupied beds. We don't increase that throughout the year. We're really close to it. In fact, our nursing department is very hopeful that by the end of the week we'll be there. And then the job will be maintaining it, because a lot of our new admissions, more than half, 70% are short stay. Okay, so they're here 2 weeks and then they go. So it's a lot of action and movement. That's 7 admissions a week. That's a busy place. So that's what we're basing our budget off. As David, I think, mentioned, a bolstered marketing budget, significantly more than we've ever budgeted. And that's spread amongst the 3 entities, most going to the nursing home for recruiting team members, residents, tenants. But if you look down below, about 2/3 of the way down, you can see depreciation and amortization is over $500,000. So that's what contributes to the net loss, showing around $800K. But we do have a small Ebitda of just over $79,000. So that's a quick summary of the budget piece, I guess. Any other questions on that? Try to give kind of a high level. If you have more, certainly feel free to give me a call, or something intrigues you, let me know. But that's
So
basic.
Kurt,
Yeah.
the traveling nurse expense is shown in the nursing direct, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many traveling nurses do you employ there?
Well, they're not all nurses per se. We have a few nurses in the skilled Heritage Living Center. I'm gonna say 2, and then I think there are 2 current certified nursing assistants that are in the nursing home side, and then we have 4 resident assistants that we utilize in assisted living. and these are basically 40-hour-a-week people. And then we have some per diems that will, when we post up shifts within the agency, they'll pick up if we've got a spot weekend or a night shift or something. So they'll come in and they'll work Saturday, Sunday, and then they're done. So I don't have an FTE for you on that, because that's a moving target, but,
However, we have the contracts that we do 8-week contracts. That's a very typical length of time that we do the on-call, or excuse me, the contract nursing teams. And so every contract that comes up, we review it, and there's one that's ending October 14th, I believe is the date, and then there's another 2 that are up for renewal in early November. So every one of those, as we hire, we back off. And we have that traction now that we're able to review that instead of just saying, we need to renew it.
yeah,
It's a big shift.
it's too easy. Yeah.
So do we provide housing for these traveling positions to help decrease the cost?
We have a contract that we provide a per diem for their housing stay. So they are responsible to find their housing here in this area. However, we have quite a few that drive here and don't need a per diem for a housing stay.
I was just thinking, average rental, $1,000 a month, we got a lot of vacancies. I was just kind of wondering if we do that.
We have in the past, and we recently updated. There's some scenarios that weren't ideal, not necessarily here at Heritage, that we do not provide housing now on site. The per diem is a very fair amount for a per diem. It's
What
not.
is that?
It's under $100 a day. Kurt, you probably know.
That's for the per diem for accommodations or housing and meals for some. So, but the fact is it does add up, and what, like Katie mentioned, several of these people are from the Tri-County area, and they're choosing to work for these agencies for whatever reason, and not pick up jobs within the established structures within the various communities. And that's problematic, but it is where it is, and so we have to do a better job recruiting.
Do you have any idea of how many, of the demand for the nursing home, and then maybe how many are going elsewhere instead of coming to the local one?
Typically, most people will come to the local care center if possible. There could be some preferences, though. They do have that choice. But I don't have a good bead on, our third of the people going to another market. Certainly, people who used to utilize the nursing home are seeking alternative care, including other assisted livings, and home health is a great viable option for many. They prefer to be in their own home, hence the short stay admission. So if they've got a Medicare covered medical procedure that was completed, they can come and have that paid 100% for, out to 20 days, and copay beyond out to 100. We've got some very good success.
I'll step in and answer some more of that question. We really, in our industry, are seeing that the residents that would typically move into our long-term or TCU setting, they're staying in the hospital, because over 90% of nursing homes at some point are not able to accept admissions as their staffing levels have been held. So we've really had a strain in our industry. This isn't just a Heritage Living Center scenario. This is across the state. We're really seeing a struggle. Hospitals have been very vocal about not being able to just charge their admissions or their hospital patients out into the home settings that they need to be in.
So to increase occupancy, you have to go and work on a couple of ends. One is marketing, and the other one is staffing levels.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, that's the key. And yeah, Katie brings up a good point. I don't know how many people just wound up
Being in a setting that isn't appropriate. Use of the hospital, of course, it has its time and space, but it's not ideal. If they need a care that's lower than that, then we need to remove those people from that setting, so people with more acute needs are in the hospital. And that has been a very significant part of our shift in the last, well, since last summer is when we really saw that challenge begin. And last summer, I mean in 2021.
And Katie, can you summarize for the rest of the board then, with Kurt's retirement, there's a search now for a new administrator, where that process is at?
Yep. So we are, we have a position posted for an executive director of Heritage Living Center. We have received 2 applicants at this point. We're starting to do screening on them. With the timing of, although Kurt gave a 2-month notice, the timing of how the applicants are slow to come in, we have posted an interim executive director role, which will allow us to ensure that we have a licensed nursing home administrator in that space. I also believe that with this timing of the change, it'll be good to have an interim person to allow that, just that shift within someone that's been there for 30+ years to a new person could be difficult. And so we have twofold idea behind having an interim administrator or executive director. Ideally, if we got someone hired even today, it'll probably be out 6 weeks from the point of hire. So we're looking at already mid to end of November, beginning of December at the very soonest, and I just don't see that happening right now based on the timing and the flow of the applicants coming in. On average, we're seeing within our Ecumen system a 6-month time frame to hire an executive director for roles that we have had open throughout our Ecumen communities. So that has been a big shift. We had a much shorter time frame pre-COVID, and now since we've been through COVID, it's just a slower process.
So one of the goals of bringing Katie and Kurt here today was to present to the board the budget and the plan for trying to work back, but also to discuss the cash balances that from 2022 and a request for ARPA funding to shore up the cash balances for 2022 so that we have a clean slate moving into 2023 and have a chance to give us the best chance to make this work-back plan work. And hopefully turn the corner in 2023 and get the financial thing more stabilized. So did we ever settle on a number we needed?
You have an operating, the last page has an operating number with the cash balances by each of the 3 units in a total.
Looks like right straight to the bottom right corner.
Correct.
1.3 million?
We're looking at about 1.38 million to shore up 2022 for all 3 entities.
What would be the net balance of the ARP funds after that?
Probably 0.
0?
Got 2, don't we?
We get 2 million and change that we haven't touched that came in May of this year.
Okay.
So 600,000.
600,000? A little bit left over to do something with.
So I think they'd be looking for support from this board to give the blessings to the work-back plan and a request for $1.4 million, basically, of ARPA funding.
Just want to ask a quick question. Was that the workback plan, did we choose one of the marketing things, or was that the one that was presumed to have been included in the budget?
It's included in the budget
Okay.
presented.
Okay.
So to summarize the work-back plan real quick, they've budgeted to worst-case scenario is what we've done. We're working to resolve the staffing shortages at Heritage Living Center. We're looking to continue the search for a new administrator, putting an interim in, and then hire a new administrator hopefully by the end of the year. And of course, try and increase census That's part of the marketing strategy, is to increase the marketing budget. We've substantially increased it. If you look at the nationwide average that was spent across multiple senior living facilities, in 2022, it was 4.8% of gross budget. We're asking for roughly about 2%, which is a huge increase over what we did before. But if we don't give ourselves a chance by having at least a reasonable marketing budget, we're not even in the game to increase census. So that's a big part of the marketing plan there also. That's it in a nutshell.
What are some of the ideas for marketing? I mean, when marketing, you'd be targeting Hubbard County, or is it a larger area?
Well, I kind of lead that to, we decided at the executive committee to go with the plan that Ecumen put forward, and I certainly don't want to micromanage how they get that done. My main goal as a board member was to make sure that they properly funded the marketing, and then let them go to work and determine where it's best suited to spend it to get the results we need. And so my goal is to, obviously, accountability for results.
Maybe just give us some ideas that you have. That's not micromanaging, just giving ideas.
Yep, so there is a significant amount that's increased for employment advertising. We have continued to focus on digital advertising. That's been something that we've seen very successful throughout, but we've added additional funding for print and radio advertising, and putting quite a bit of work into updating our website or collateral print pieces to make them updated and current. We are doing direct mail campaigns, which is something that is very expensive, so we have tended to shy away from that because of the expense. However, it gets into the mailboxes of a significant amount of people, obviously here in the community. And then we continue to focus around referrals and doing events that are a part of our community to increase our focus on the Heritage Manor specifically, because that's really where our demand has lagged, is in the Heritage Manor building.
Plus, correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, Ecumen's gonna provide a staff person to work on this more diligently and
Correct.
help with crafting
Yep, thank
the
you.
proper messaging to convey to people out there the advantages of the Heritage Campus over our competitors. We need to do a better job of getting that message out and why a Heritage Campus may be a better option for
Yep,
folks.
so we have direct dollars here on the campus of Heritage Living Center that are pointed towards specifically marketing and working the budget and what we need to do here in the community, along with a partnership with our Ecumen marketing director as well. So we are responsible to manage and continue to make that happen as far as all the moving parts of managing a marketing budget. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that go into it.
The hardcore reality of all these things is we don't have a lot of choice. I mean, we have to put our best foot forward to try and get this stabilized. And 6 months from now, if we can't, we got some hard decisions to make, you guys.
It's just really.
But I really feel positive about the direction we're going. You can see signs of positive things happening, and I think we're gonna hit a train of positive things, I'm hoping. We should have a good idea in 3 to 6 months exactly where we're at. And beyond that, I don't know what else we can do.
I would say that, I think we could safely say we've hit bottom, and we're coming
I
back
think
up,
so.
which is a good sign. So today we'll be just looking for a motion to release some funds. And are we looking at the exact 1380134?
And I would ask that also include, are you gonna come within the next board meeting, or do you want this taken care of now with the ECPN? Maybe save it for next meeting, but as part of this, understand that ECPN is a piece of that puzzle too that we've been doing every year, and Kurt will be coming before the board
Unfortunately,
the
Department of Human Services won't release that amount until this month, mid-October. So we don't even have a number to
The number.
bring forward. We have a budget, but
You may not know by the next county board meeting of the month. It's hard to say, because he said mid-October. But if we do, we will.
And our next board meeting will be the 18th, so we
It'll
may
be
be looking
close.
at something in November.
Possibly, yeah.
Well, I will make the motion to bless the workback plan and also release $1.4 million of ARPA fund to shore up the 2022 cash shortages.
I'll second.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Tom. Any further discussion?
It's just very disheartening as, you know, the only commissioner henceforth back to 2014, and here we are today. It's a bad deal. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. All right, then, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you for the details, you guys.
thank you for the time.
And thank you for your decision. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I probably might not see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, or maybe.
Okay.
Maybe you will. I don't know. We'll see where ECPM goes.
Well, like Char said, come as a, you know, the
As
public.
public?
Yeah.
Public, yeah. If I could say, it's just been an honor and privilege to serve the county in this capacity. You know, I started in 1988, and at that time, I was directly accountable to the county board and Ecumen. I had, you know, this going on. I have a lot of memories with a lot of commissioners. I think when I started, it was Jerry Fuller, Dick Thorson, and Larry Burgoon, and Winston Manlove, and Lyle Robinson.
Is that a picture?
Yeah.
You want a better one? Should we have them up here and all of us stand up here? Get a good picture. Kurt, come on up.
Eric,
Can we move the chairs out of the way?
So, most of
In the middle.
Big shoot in the middle?
Yeah.
It's getting all formal now. That's it?
I can send it to you.
Oh, will you? Okay, sure.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Shar. Thank you.
You're welcome.
David, thank you.
Congratulations. Enjoy your retirement. Send down the materials, huh?
Yeah, maybe all winter. Yes, thank you.
Who died? Could we take a 5-minute break before we have the closed session?
Thinking about asking that.
Okay,
So
that'd
we'll
be
go and recess here for a few minutes.
Thanks, Kay, for answering my question.
Alrighty. We're back from our recess. And it looks like the next on the agenda is to go into closed session.
So we would need a motion to close the open session and go into closed session.
Also move.
Sure. And I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're now in closed session.
Thank goodness.
We should be good.
Alrighty, so we're back in open session. I guess we'll be looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to enter into a brokerage agreement with Senior Care Realty with some minor changes made to the commercial listing contract that Jeff mentioned. You want to mention that again, how you stated that?
So we would make sure that the contract, payment provisions, that the county board has the ability to accept or reject any bid, and that a payment of a fee would be contingent on a successful closing of the property.
That's my motion.
Alrighty. I'll second it. Any further discussion?
I'm not sure I have enough information to be able to vote affirmatively right now.
Alrighty. So, with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Have it as 3-2.
It's 2 opposed,
That's what I got.
just want to make sure my volume is working.
Administrator update, I would just talk about the agenda for the work session next week. As I understand it, we're gonna be reviewing the sheriff's office, the public safety budget, and we're gonna be reviewing the social services budget. What was the third item on the agenda for next week?
Okay. So I guess we have committee reports. Dan, would you like to start?
Did we have a meeting in Northwest? I gotta try to remember if that was the time before. I'm not sure, Ted.
That was before our last board meeting. So, yeah, we already spoke on Northwest too.
Just covered in prevention, definitely looking at, or gathering information to bring back to the board regarding a proposed ordinance that we talked about prior to, and that's, so we'll be reaching out, or Angie will be reaching out to Jeff, get some SAMA info regarding THC and either regulating it or doing nothing that we were talking about a month ago.
Yeah, did you see the article on the national news today was talking about the mental health crisis that's going on with the abuse of that? It's pretty interesting and timely.
Yep. So we're just trying to get some information before it comes to the board. That's all that I have.
All right, thank you. Shar?
Tom and I are with Jeff. We've met with every union at least once. Dave, you want to cover HLDC? We already talked about Heritage, and Tom and I were at the Mojave meeting on Friday, and finally, they've changed the mandates for the vaccination and the masking, so children in Head Starts and the workers no longer need to mask up. If you haven't been vaccinated, you still need to test weekly, but they do not need to keep that on record. I don't have anything else from Mojave, do you?
Tom?
Yeah, we had Parks Board meeting last week. With Splash Pad, they had requested a grant from Blandon Foundation. Well, they had denied it. But the board, including myself, were still really in favor of the Splash Pad, so we're going to pursue other options, because that'd be a really nice addition to that. So I'd like to see that happen. So
If you can recycle the water instead of digging a new well.
yeah, well, we have to just look at whatever options are coming up. Yeah, that would be a great addition.
Yep.
So we're not through with that, just because Blandon turned us down. And then at the last month's meeting, had two people who presented a proposal to convert the softball field into a regular baseball field, which would require considerable expansion. And so we discussed it at our last meeting, and there just really isn't any room there to do that, because I think a softball field, I don't know exact dimensions, it's not in my head, but something like 250 feet or so. And we'd have to add another 100, or 275, have to add another 100 feet for a regular baseball field. But after discussing it, looking at maybe possible options, the city owns a fair amount of land where they already have the existing softball field, so why not possibly put it there? The two people who were proposing it were, because the high school has a baseball field, but they're needing another field, more space. So maybe try to get them to go over there instead. I don't know if all of you know, but Deep Lake Park has received a high rating, so that's good. So it could possibly receive that regional park designation, which would open doors for more grant funding. We had a Kitsukami Regional Library meeting, and reviewed a couple draft changes to the personnel policy and one to the region-wide policy. I proposed several changes to the region-wide policy because I didn't like the way it was leaning towards that, the direction it was leaning. And then also waiting on results of the budget requests to cities and counties.
I have one thing to add about Mojave that the board needs to know about. I ran into a single mom, and she did not know I was on the Mojave board, and she was crying, and I asked her if she cared to share. And she shared that the Head Start program had been shut down because it was in the Floyd Wright building, and it was being moved to Century School. And so Head Start literally shut down. And so if you were a single mom or even a two-parent or a grandparent or whatever, and you did not have the option for childcare, this woman wasn't able to go to work because she didn't have childcare. And I said, let me see what I can do. I contacted the childcare facilities I knew of, asked them to contact others, and there honestly was nowhere to put her child short-term. So then I contacted Liz, and then Liz expounded on it at the meeting. And so Mojave had started the licensing process in June. The state finally got on it just 3 weeks ago. But what Liz told me, because I said, who can I contact so this doesn't happen? Because this woman was worried she wouldn't have a job to go back to, because it had been, I think, 3 weeks since she could work. It turns out that it was legislatively decided how Head Start would be licensed. And so 2 facilities in Park Rapids of Head Start cannot be open simultaneously because of the criteria that is needed for both classrooms. And so Liz said what we really need to do is contact our legislatures. So I'm going to be contacting Paul Upke to try to get a state change, because this is affecting Head Start participants statewide, a glitch in the system. So Head Start did reopen yesterday, but not without consequences to the very people that are willing to work and needing jobs that were not able to possibly work because of how the state is regulating. That was pretty interesting.
David?
Regarding HLDC, just kind of giving you an update, some of the things that are going on. There are 4 individuals from Humber County that are participating in the ILT cohort sponsored by Northwest Innovators Network. And we had a grant to help match and fund those 4 participating in that from USDA. Also, let's see. Mary continues to meet with quite a few businesses around town, a lot of activity there. working on trying to get our sign updated, so you can see, actually, need to get a bigger sign with a phrase that is more understanding to people in a simple one sentence what that space is. So they're working on that.
And there's regulations in the city for
Yep.
signage,
They're
so that's
dealing with.
part of the challenge.
Yep. And then Shar might even expand on this a little bit, but we had an interesting discussion, and I know there was an online meeting regarding a company called Night Moves. And the staff had talked with the HLDC board about an organization that provides computer science training to individuals with the goal of providing locally based remote technology jobs.
So we actually, last Wednesday, we had another meeting, and it was remote, although I came into town and sat with several others that were there. It was very well attended by local schools and also M-State. And there will be a face-to-face meeting this next Thursday. They're moving forward with trying to get this implemented, hopefully for 2023.
Good. Yeah, it sounds very, very interesting. It's not an easy course. I mean, the materials is hard, but it's a good job, and it's very flexible for people that would help keep them in our area.
Which is part of the goal, to
Mhm.
work with the underserved, to keep them in their hometown communities, while giving employable jobs that offer a living wage.
Yep, that's all I have.
Alrighty. Let's see, I had a Mississippi Headwaters Board meeting. Part of that meeting, we talked about a letter we got from Pete Stauber. He's introduced some legislation for land exchange on Lake Winnebagosh. It's Bowen Lodge is currently there. They want to trade a parcel that they have that's pristine, untouched lakeshore for a parcel that the Forestry Service has. So it's kind of a good for the Forestry Service and also for the lodge to keep in business. And the Mississippi Headwaters Board has supported that. We also talked about Camp Ripley's forestry partnerships. That's with Morrison County's Soil and Water Conservation District and the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Let's see, we also had a variance request in Morrison County. It was a non-conforming lot, legal non-conforming lot. They want to have, instead of the 150-foot setback from the lake, they wanted 120. The Morrison County Board went to 130. There was concern about whether or not there could be a septic system installed. And we basically okayed it, but with the note that the people who were, if they were going, and then it ends up the neighboring property owner ended up buying that parcel next door and then buying this parcel also. But because they are two separate lots, they didn't have to join them together. The only question was on the lot that was not built on, if there would be room for a septic system at a 130-foot setback. So that was kind of one of the conditions. But the people who now own that lot weren't the original people looking for the variance. It was in the process when the lot sold. So the county, Morrison County, continued the variance process because that was for the lot, not for the people who owned it. So as far as, and the people who now own the lot were not even present. So we have a feeling that they're not interested in building on it. They wanted to have that open space still because they bought the lot next door with that open space. But we had no input, so we had to deal with just the facts that we had at this point on that. We also had a presentation from,
So did you approve it, or did you just, or,
we approved it with a condition.
okay,
We also had a James Wanstall, he's a DNR conservation. He's talked about focus area presentations. And I was looking, he didn't send the information that we had requested at that meeting, which was last Friday. But in the state, there's several different conservation focus areas, and he talked about those, and I was kind of curious as to, there's only, I think there's 30 of them, and there's 6 that are presently being looked at, and I was curious as to where we sat, but I did not get that information. We updated our website, and also with the DNR, also updated their website so that when somebody might be on there, on the DNR website looking for something, there might be a link to the Mississippi Headwaters Board website, which then takes them to our website, of course, and shows them the different things that we've got going on. And let's see, and I guess that's all I had from the Mississippi Headwaters Board. Then I had a managers meeting where we talked about the budget season, heritage a little bit, and contract negotiations. Environmental services talked about the new permitting software and that it's the end of the season rush. Soil and water talked about the Grain Corps employees starting, and Gladen's Construction was starting the new demolition cell at the North Transfer Station. And the fabric building for up at the North Transfer Station had been dropped off but hasn't been put up yet. And that's, there again, Josh said that was the end of the year and they're just getting ready for winter. IT upgrading the bandwidth, or the band, our capabilities here, our speed, our internet speed, should be 10 times what it currently is. Paul Bunyan Communications will be the main line, and RVIG will be the backup or secondary line. They had a tech update at the Sheriff's Department. Natural Resource Management, they had a timber auction, it'll be the last of the year. Prices are slowly climbing. At that point, Chip had talked about the Deep Lake Park and how we were gonna hear news the next day about whether we got high designation or not, which we did. And then they talked about the master plan from the consultant SRF. Veteran Services, Jerry talked about their training went well. They got a $10,000 grant. Coffee with the Vets went well, and he's hoping to do it again before, if there's no snow. And he was looking at, I believe, October. And also the Itasca boat trip went well, and they talked about ditch cleanup, and how they participate in that. Highway, Jed talked about interviewing maintenance 2 position, talked about 119 starting Monday with a question mark. And there again, just talking about getting ready for the end of the year and getting ready for winter. Maintenance said the same thing, getting ready for cooler weather, and talked about furniture coming. Auditor Treasurer, challenges working with Tyler, the audit, elections. Early voting started. Sounds like the Auditor Treasurer, of course now with elections starting and everything, are eyeball deep, I'm sure. HR, new payroll hire, working out, cross-training, time crunch and social services. Talked about some stuff that was discussed at AMC. And I guess I can't read my handwriting at the end there. So that's all I got. And if there's nothing else, we've talked about the meetings of interest that are coming up. So if I can get a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll second.
Thank you, Shar.
We wanted to adjourn for a little while.
I kept waiting for you, Dan.
Give them a hard time.
All those in favor say aye.
Right.
We are adjourned.
Does anybody know why my phone says that I need a password